Good evening. We'll call this regular meeting of the board to order. Terry, could you confirm we're in compliance with open meeting laws?
Yes, we are.
And if you could call the roll, please.
Commissioner Zur? Here. Commissioner Bika?
Here.
Commissioner Clements?
Here.
Commissioner Farrar?
Here.
Commissioner Johnson?
Here.
Commissioner Lyons?
Here.
Commissioner Nordine?
Here. First order of business tonight is to adjourn to closed session. I would hear a motion to adjourn to closed session under 19.851A, C, and F. We will be discussing a procedural matter related to a grievance.
So moved. Second.
And a roll call vote, please, Terry, when you're ready.
Commissioner Zur?
Yep.
Commissioner Bika?
Yes.
Commissioner Clements?
Yes.
Commissioner Farrar?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Lyons?
Yes.
Commissioner Nordine?
Yes. We are adjourned to closed session. We'll reconvene around 7 p.m. All right, we will reconvene our open session. The board made a decision on a procedural issue related to a grievance. The parties that to be informed of that will be. At this time, we will move on to our Pledge of Allegiance. Tonight's students are from Meadowview. We have 3 of them. The first one is it Cadell?
Yes.
Okay, Cadell Rudebush. Cadell is a polite, respectful, and inquisitive student in Miss Loback's class. He loves to learn and he shares his knowledge with his class, oftentimes spurring decisions about ancient Egypt or other discussions, about ancient Egypt or other topics with his peers. He is creative and loves to read, completing multiple books a week and connecting his learning to different subject areas. Cadell is hardworking and kind to others. He is a wonderful example of a Meadowview hawk. Next is Kenzie Rudebush, who is in Mrs. Lynch's class. Kenzie is a charismatic and thoughtful 3rd grader. She leads with encouragement, compassion, and loves to make others smile. Peers looked up to her because of her positive attitude and friendly demeanor. She treats everyone with kindness and respect. Finally, Kiana Rudebush in Mrs. Melhauser's class. Kiana is an extremely kind and compassionate 5th grader who's always willing to help out those around her. She takes on challenges with a smile on her face and pushes herself to grow as a learner. She's a role model for outstanding work ethic and always makes sure she does her absolute best. Thank you to all 3 of the Rudebushes for joining us today. Those of you who are willing and able, please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
We will now move on to the adoption of tonight's agenda. I would hear a motion to adopt the agenda for the evening.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed. We'll now move on to our regular recognitions. As always, we turn it over to Superintendent Johnson.
Thank you, Chair Nordine, board members, student representatives, and distinguished guests this evening. Administratively, I have 2 recognitions. First off, Meadowview Veterans Day program. Meadowview loved coming together on November 11th to honor our school community veterans in person and through a slideshow for those who could not be with us. Our Veterans Day program provided our 5th graders an opportunity to take a leadership role with speaking parts, instrumental parts, singing or learning American Sign Language for our national anthem. We worked with our neighborhood Cub Scouts to post colors and lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance. As a school, we took time to learn the history behind Veterans Day as well as each military branch's song. Our students were quite excited to welcome in and honor their veteran at our program and had the privilege of hearing them speak in our classroom afterwards. We look forward to continuing to honor our veterans with this program in years to come. This evening, Kit Schiffelbein, Meadowview principal, was supposed to be here tonight to accept this recognition. She is not able to be with us tonight, so we will get that recognition to Meadowview Elementary School. Secondly, Roosevelt student artwork. First of all, do we have Is Natalie here this evening? Perfect. Natalie, I'll talk about you in a second. APH, American Printing House for the Blind Insights, an annual jury competition and exhibition is organized by APH for artists of all ages with vision loss. International in scope, this project reflects our mission to promote the independence of people who are blind and visually impaired by encouraging individuals to create original art. Around 500 entries in all types of media are received each year. Judges from Louisville's education and art community select pieces for display at the APH annual meeting in October. Prize winners are invited to come to Louisville to receive their awards at an evening banquet. Artwork from entries may also be reproduced in the Insights art calendar and as images on greeting cards. Natalie Langford, a second grader at Roosevelt this year, tied for third place for her age group, first through third grade. In the competition, and her artwork, Chalk Cat, was displayed at APH last month for their annual meeting. APH employee requested to purchase Natalie's art. So much. Natalie and her family are here tonight to accept this recognition. So Natalie and your family, or if it's just Natalie, if you would like to step up with me and get your picture taken.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll make it.
You'll be able to swing through, you'll be able to slide through that easily.
Thanks, Terry.
All right, very good.
Joe? How about this? Can I kneel down next to you? Okay.
All set. That's great.
We also have one board recognition tonight. This is the first meeting of the board since we received the results from our November 8th referendum election. As I'm sure all of you are well aware, the ECASD community overwhelmingly supported our students and schools by voting yes for this phase of our capital needs. On behalf of the board, I would like to extend our gratitude to those who voted in support of our school system, as well as the many volunteers who advocated for the referendum. One major role that we would like to recognize tonight is the impact of our administrative team in ensuring that community members had the information they needed to make a decision on the referendum. This included managing the referendum webpage, answering email questions, updating frequently asked questions, and providing information about the plans, its impacts, and its costs. This included many members of our staff across myriad departments who did all that they could to ensure that our community had accurate, up-to-date information in making their decision. Thank you to each and every one of you on our staff for your efforts. And finally, tonight, the board would like to specially recognize 4 individuals from the administrative team that worked countless hours in explaining the referendum to our community. As you may know, Superintendent Mike Johnson, Executive Director Abby Johnson, Executive Director Kim Kohler, and Communications Director Terry Piper Thompson presented referendum information at over 80 events within the district, including every school and district building, sporting events, community organizations such as the Ellie Phillips Senior Center and Rotary Clubs, and PTAs, PTOs, and neighborhood associations. Without their tireless efforts, our community would not have been able to make an informed vote for this referendum. It is my pleasure on behalf of the board to recognize this contribution to our district and to the future of Eau Claire schools. Thank you. We do have a small token of our appreciation from the board, but given that we have a lot of people waiting for public comment tonight, I will give those to you and the rest afterwards. But thank you all for your work, making sure that our community knew what was at stake in this referendum. We could not have done it without you. So next we'll move on to our public forum. The board provides what is usually a 30-minute time period, although we have quite a long list tonight. I'm sure we will go long. For members of the community to address the board. Each speaker will be allowed up to 4 minutes to address the board. The time will be on the monitor there for you to see, and I will interrupt and cut you off if your 4 minutes runs out. I'm sorry about that, but that is how we'll try to keep things moving along. The board does not hear personal complaints of school personnel nor any person connected with the school system in a public forum. When your name is called, if you would just come to the desk here, you don't need to do anything with the microphone, but that helps us to know where we're looking. Our first speaker tonight is Andrew Seaborg. And as Mr. Seaborg comes forward, I'll just apologize in advance if I mispronounce any of your names. As someone who's looks like Norden and sounds like Nordine, I understand trying, and I'll do my best. Mr. Seaborg, the floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Eau Claire School District, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Superintendent, concerned citizens of Eau Claire. Good evening. My name is Andrew Seaborg, and I have the privilege of serving as Honorary Consul of Japan in Wisconsin. This is a diplomatic appointment in which I get to represent the interests of Japan and serve as a liaison between the Japanese government and Wisconsin businesses, state and local municipalities to help develop and strengthen economic and cultural ties between Japan and the United States. You may not realize this, but when you published your decision in Eau Claire, it rapidly flew to Chicago, to the consulate, then to the embassy in Washington, D.C., and the Ministry of Education in Tokyo. You've received multiple letters from concerned organizations, among them from Consul General Hiroshi Tajima, who stated that the Japanese government takes Japanese language education very seriously, and I'm here to encourage you to reconsider. I'm also here to offer the resources of the Japanese government, including salary assistance and teacher recruitment when the time might be right. Japan is arguably America's closest and most reliable ally. We share interests economically, from a foreign policy and security standpoint, from education and research, and culturally. The state of Wisconsin has very strong ties to Japan. There are more than 80 Japanese-owned businesses in the state, including Kikkoman Foods, which will celebrate its 50th anniversary next year. Companies that used to sound foreign are now household names. Komatsu, Hitachi, Fujifilm have invested billions of dollars in Wisconsin, making Japan the single largest foreign direct investor in our state. These Japanese companies created 7,400 jobs in the state of Wisconsin in 2021. During the last 5 years, the number of Japanese business facilities increased by 14%, and total employment rose by 8.4%. Those are big numbers, and those jobs are life-changing for the people of Wisconsin. From a security perspective, Japan and the United States are confronting unprecedented challenges. China is threatening free navigation in the Pacific and openly discussing an invasion of Taiwan. North Korea is now a nuclear power, with ICBMs being tested regularly. From an educational perspective, Japan is a leading research partner of U.S. institutions as well as K-12 schools. Did you know that the 2015 Nobel Prize was a collaboration between William Campbell, who earned his PhD at UW-Madison, and Satoshi Omura, a Japanese researcher? Together, they eliminated river blindness, working collaboratively across the sea. There are 460 students in Japanese programs at the University of Wisconsin right now. The State Department calls Japan a critical language. It's one of the most desired languages of employers. It's one of the most in demand among employees as well as students. It is one of the most in-demand languages on Duolingo. As I'm sure you know, more and more school districts require foreign languages as a requirement throughout high school. Selective colleges look favorably on Asian languages. From a cultural perspective, have you noticed that there seems to be a sushi restaurant in just about every small town in America today? Parents play Pokemon with their kids. Let's admit, we've all sung karaoke. Japanese video games lead the world. Japanese fashion, Japanese anime. How many of you do Sudoku when you take a break? Things Japan are everywhere. It's an incredibly important part of our society. In closing,
That's your time. I'm sorry.
thank you. Thank you very much.
Neil Johnson.
Hello.
you're ready.
I want to thank you for the opportunity, being able to speak in front of both the school board and the community that seems so passionate about something that I was very much involved in my high school. I took about 3 years of Japanese with Nagai Sensei, and it was life-changing, I want to say. She's one of the best teachers I've had at Memorial. She is one of the people I still talk to when I came back here after graduating from Madison, where I took 2 more years of Japanese. A lot of my friends that I moved to Madison with to be in UW-Madison, they also took Japanese, completed the course, went on to learn Korean and Indonesian and even like other languages that I forgot at this point. And so it's just such a great stepping stone to be able to do so much with what I was given here, because I was born in Eau Claire. I've been in the ECASD all my life, and the things I've learned here is just, I don't think I could have gotten it anywhere else. And so having this program that really changed my life not being offered to even my children someday really upsets me personally. And I would really appreciate having this program in the future. And I really didn't expect to be emotional, but thank you.
Carol Johnson.
I would like to pass my time to Allison Lewis.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you.
That's great. I am here actually only as a mouthpiece for my son, Henry, who is back at college, so he could not be here tonight. He writes, "Dear Superintendent Johnson and members of the school board, as a member of the Memorial High School class of 2022 who participated in the Japanese language program, I write to you today asking that you reconsider what seems to me to be a short-sighted decision to end the Japanese and Hmong language programs. I took all 4 years of Japanese at Memorial and loved my experience. Hiroga Nagai, my teacher, was energetic, encouraging, and expert at presenting the language step by step with lots of practice and review so that I could learn it well. Her classes were some of the best I took at Memorial, and the language skills I learned from her helped to open up my future to me. I currently attend Grinnell College, a selective liberal arts college in Iowa. Last year, Grinnell accepted only 9.2% of its 12,000 applicants. I am sure that my 4 years of Japanese language distinguished me as an applicant, helping me to be admitted with significant scholarship money. Not many high schools offer Japanese, despite the usefulness of the language, so my study of the language must have set me apart. I tested into 3rd semester college Japanese and continued to study the language at Grinnell. In fact, I was one of 3 selected from my class to give a speech in Japanese next March at the Japanese Prime Consulate in Chicago, and I will study abroad in Japan during my junior year. I am a digital artist. With Japan being the center of animated media production, my knowledge of Japanese will be invaluable to me in my career. To eliminate Japanese and Hmong language studies from Eau Claire high schools to offer only Western languages to Eau Claire students is to send the message that only Western languages are worth studying and teaching. It also keeps half of the world closed to Eau Claire students as they develop their ambitions. Because I study Japanese, I can imagine going there, studying and working there, developing relationships with people and businesses across the globe. Cutting Japanese and Hmong language programs also cheapens students' cultural experiences right here at home. Japanese and Hmong language faculty represent a significant percentage of the faculty of color at Memorial High School and at North. It is important generally for students to study with faculty who are not white. Very specifically, it is vital for students from this geographical area to study with Hmong teachers to come to learn the culture and genuinely heroic history of their fellow Hmong citizens. Instead of cutting these programs, consider promoting them. I didn't know about Japanese or Hmong language classes at Memorial until I received the course catalog 2 weeks before registration. Consider presenting the opportunities afforded by these language programs to students in middle schools. Let them know about the fun, the trips abroad, the possibilities for their futures. Cultivate students' ambitions to boost numbers in the language classes. Cutting these programs closes important windows onto the world for Eau Claire's students. It curtails their ambitions, narrows their futures, keeps them isolated, and invites the ignorance that feeds racism to take up residence in their lives. I encourage you to imagine a better world than that. I'm proud of him. Keep the Hmong and Japanese language programs going.
Next is Manny Fernandez. And just to help us, after that will be Clay Lawton.
Hello, greetings to the board and to the audience. My name is Manny Fernandez. I'm a faculty with the Spanish section at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. I'm here partly to represent my wife, who could not be here today. She is the Japanese instructor at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. And I will read from something that she wrote to the superintendent slightly to comment on it to the rest of the board. We read the executive summary that was provided to, I believe, the administrative team that is working on this decision to cut some of the languages. There's 3 languages that I believe are being affected by this. It's Japanese, also Hmong, and ASL to some degree also. I hope other people will speak to Hmong also, because I think that's a very important topic to discuss. Also, each one of these languages has its own different particular characteristics and its own communities that it affects. The executive summary mentioned about Japanese the following, that although employers are seeking candidates that can speak Japanese, sustaining high quality instruction in these courses has been difficult. And we took issue with that, knowing some students who are taking courses at the high school and who speak very highly of the instructor there, as somebody here just did right now. And from my wife's perspective, she takes in a subset of that group who graduates from Memorial High School, goes on to the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. And this is what she has to say about those students that she comes into contact with. As the only faculty member in the Japanese program at University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, I have had many students in my class who learned their Japanese at one of the high schools in Eau Claire. I have taught at UWEC for the past 19 years, since 2003, and I can confidently say that most of those students' preparation in the study of Japanese was much better than other students who learned Japanese elsewhere. Not too many students placed into the second year level Japanese class via our placement test, but many of those who were placed into the second year or even the third year were from Eau Claire high schools. This attests to the quality of the high school Japanese program in the Eau Claire School District. And I would say, isn't that something to be proud of? I understand that we're an outlier in terms of the number of courses that we offer, but as was just said, this is something to promote, not something to be afraid of. You know, it's something that we can sell. It's something that we can attract people to this community with who are interested in having their children take these classes. I myself, my child speaks Japanese, but she has students who she promotes these classes to her students. She participates in the Japanese club. This is something that we can help promote about Eau Claire. We're an international community, internationally minded, and we can even work with international governments. I mean, wow, how many other school districts can possibly say that they do that? One more thing I did want to comment on. The transparency issue about this has been clearly not very good. People have not learned about this in the way that I think they should. There apparently have been surveys that were made there in the executive summary. There's reference to them. There's no information given about what the responses were, how many people responded, how they responded. I think clarity needs to be achieved here when we're trying to make major changes to something that affects people very deeply. So that's something that I'm sure other people will address, but I want to bring it up because it definitely is an issue. When the school board makes decisions that affects people in the community, the school board needs to communicate that, whether it's the school board, the superintendent, the administrative body, who I'm not sure who that is exactly that made these decisions, but things need to be communicated. Bottom line, I've got a few seconds left. We can promote languages. I mean, I'm in the languages department. Obviously, I'm very interested in this at the university, but it's something that we can promote. It's something that affects people. It's life transforming. I have many students who go abroad. It changes their lives. They go on, they live abroad. It's just transformative to them. So as somebody says, it affects their worldview, makes them into totally different kind of human beings, the kind of human beings I think we want. So that's my time. I'll cede it to others. Thank you.
Next is Clay Lawton. And after that will be Reiko Shino.
Hey guys, hi, my name's Clay Lawton. I took Japanese class, I'm not good at speaking in front of a large audience, so I apologize. I've taken Japanese for about 3 years now, actually the same class that Luna was in. And I am going to say that it has changed my life for the better and not the worst. Nagai Sensei kind of felt like another mother to me. She'd hold me accountable when I do things wrong. She'd help support me and uplift me even when I do things wrong. But she would also compliment. She'd also support. She just all around helpful, a very helpful human being. If it wasn't for the Japanese program and programs like it, I don't know where I would have been. I don't know what kind of stereotypes I would have had floating around in my head about other people. I didn't know, I didn't know if I'd be bilingual. Even though I've taken like 3 years, it's still helpful. I'm sorry if it's like all over the place. Like I said, not good at public speaking. But about 4 years ago, about a couple of months after we went to Japan as a group, I was in a Dairy Queen with my pastor and his wife. And his wife, she introduced me to these two girls, two schoolgirls from Nagasaki. And if it wasn't for these 3 years of Japanese, I don't think I would have been able to talk to them. I don't think I would have gotten able to know them, to understand what they were saying. So if there is one thing I can say to you guys, please keep these programs. You don't know how many people that these would probably help, how many immigrants there are in this city that will feel represented from this program. So please just do it. That's all I have to say. Thank you, guys.
Next is Reiko Shino, followed by Kabu.
Okay, I'm a professor at the University of Eau Claire. I've been a professor for 20 years, but I'm still not very good at public speech. So, I'm sorry if I might scramble. I may not be able to as clear as I am. I have been teaching Asian and world history for 20 years. I have worked with many students coming out of the Eau Claire district and having taken Japanese. They have been excellent. And so are Hmong students who know, who have their own, experience of, knowing the Asian history and, Asian languages. And they're just excellent, okay? And I thank you for producing all these excellent students. And I feel so sad that you are trying to sort of, my boyfriend told me not to use this word because it would be too strong, but shooting your own feet, but if it's not an appropriate language, sorry, English is my second language, by the way. So, but what I'm trying to say is that as a professor of history, grading all these papers every day, I read intently the World Language Review Summary, and it's a very good start that any professor would say. It's a very good start, but you need a little bit more work, right? You need more work. What's missing in that report was that, philosophy of language education, philosophy of meeting more than just the business need, you are missing on those. And more important piece for EDI, equity, diversity, inclusivity in the city and in the K-12 education is that, the proportion, the ratio of minority students versus white students in those reports. I did not see that. We know that Hmong language classes are filled with students with Hmong heritage and other Asian heritage. We know the Japanese languages class has people like Clay and other minority students, not just for white students. And those are the students who, see those language classes as their home in their high school. school, and that they create friendships, and then friendships outside of the city and outside the school, outside the city, and then become a very proud high school graduate who wants to go to good colleges. So you're really, really, shooting that, the core of the program. And the thing is, as I said, I know I've done a lot of administrative work in the university and have written these reports. I know it's a lot of work, and I really commend that. And I also know that, Wisconsin are having a lot of budget issues. But what I'm trying to say here is let's work together. Like university, like as a transnational Asian studies committee chair, I have considered applying for different funds, and I was delighted to hear that the Japanese embassy is going to help us one way or the other. And I am experienced. Actually, I'm the one who was on the search committee to recruit Professor Tomomi Kakegawa when I came here. So the thing is that I am very happy to use my connections in Japanese studies and Asian studies in this community if there are any staffing issue in the future. Right now, we have a wonderful teacher in the school district, but if she wins lottery or something and decide not to, then I will help. I will help, and our committee will help. So the thing is that I really want the school district to reconsider this and then work this difficult time, collaborate as a whole, and then so that we can retain this wonderful program that you guys have worked so hard to create.
Next is Ka Vu, and then Vang, excuse me.
Is this where I stand?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Ka Vu, and I'm a program director at Black and Brown Women Power Coalition. I was born and raised in Eau Claire and graduated from Memorial High School in 2013. 2 of my 3 brothers who graduated from Memorial took Japanese as their world language. I am here to talk about the lack of transparency and inclusion of students and community members in decision-making for the Japanese course and the Hmong course. In high school, I always felt like there were parts of my Hmong identity that I had to keep at home and only take the American part with me to school. I kept my identity hidden and tried to blend in as much as possible. When I graduated from Memorial, I was lost about who I was. I attended UW Eau Claire and was exposed to a group of Hmong students that changed the way I saw the world. When I met this group of students at UW Eau Claire that made up the Hmong Student Association, it was like after 18 years of living here, I could finally call Eau Claire home. In my final years at UW Eau Claire, I took a Hmong language course. I took this course and paid money to learn about myself. That is not how I want anyone to have to learn about their own identity. I cannot stress enough about how important this course was in cultivating the language that I had lost through the education system, which does not operate with bilingual students in mind. Learning Hmong to me is more than just language. It is about identity. It was about bringing power back to myself and loving myself when I'd hidden parts of me for so long. While I understand that while you may not be cutting the Hmong language class and that it is simply being consolidated into a social studies class, I will also push back at this idea because the purpose of having a Hmong language class is not only to learn the Hmong language, its culture, and its history, but it is also meant to validate the existence of this language within this region to be reflected in the curriculum. While Hmong may not be a language spoken worldwide, it has impacts here, in our community, in our schools, in your halls. I believe that matters. I believe it matters because it is identity affirming to be seen as a true member of this community and be reflected in the curriculum. Because Hmong was not available as a language until recently, many individuals who took Japanese, such as my brothers, are Hmong. I have to reiterate again in case you haven't gotten it. Being represented, even if by a different ethnicity entirely, is powerful. It is impactful. I believe that unless you plan on having the social studies class also count as a language course, then Hmong language should remain separate. I am asking for continued discussion with community members before displacing the Hmong language program and eliminating Japanese. If you go forward with your decision, I will not ask, but demand that the individuals teaching these courses now and in the future are seen as leaders and given your utmost institutional support and power in deciding what these courses look like. I spent a lot of time being ashamed of who I was in high school. This is something I know still exists for many Hmong and non-white students of this community. But I see hope along the horizon if and when these decisions are made with youth and the community in mind. I have a 4th brother who is a first year at North High School. He, like me, knows very little about his own culture and can barely speak the language. But one of the very first things he wanted to do when he joined high school was to take Japanese and join the Hmong Club. My brother is a quiet and reserved teen, but I've seen so much change about him with opportunities I wish I'd had in high school. Curiosity is powerful. After joining Hmong Club, being around peers who are Hmong, and having teachers who represent his identity, he began to ask questions about his words in our language, their meaning, the purpose of items at home, and their history. I can only imagine who he will become if he was given the opportunity to engage in his language in ways I was never able to. I do a lot of things in the name of uplifting the voices of marginalized people and youth. Above all, I do the work I do selfishly because the future of my brothers depends on whether or not I will stay silent on issues of injustice. I've spent a lot of time being ashamed of myself, and I will not let the youth of our community endure the same when they are not included in these conversations. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Vang will be Mackenzie Hurlis.
Good evening. My name is Eli Vang, and I reside at 2635 Crestwood Road. I'm a freshman at North High School. I currently am enrolled in the Hmong language class at North High School. On Thursday, November 17th of 2022, Mr. Yang, who teaches the Hmong language class, shared with the class of the Hmong language being absorbed into the Hmong history and culture. As I processed this news, I became overwhelmed with so many emotions that reflected disappointment in the district and how they are eliminating the courses that pertain to my interests. Throughout all my 14 years of residing in this community and accessing all the educational opportunities available for me, for the first time, I experienced microaggression exclusion from the district that my fellow classmates and teachers trusted to commit their actions to building an equitable and inclusive school community. Being a Hmong student, I have always taken pride in being Asian and Hmong. My parents raised me speaking both Hmong and English, but due to dominant exposure in the Hmong in the English language through the media sources around me, English became my first language. This created a language barrier between communicating with Hmong elders and especially my grandparents, whose English proficiency was very low. For the first time, utilizing what I've learned in my Hmong class, I'm starting to feel more comfortable in conversing in Hmong with my parents. I'm able to formulate sentences and comprehend Hmong conversations. At my church, I volunteer to run the sound system and worship slide presentations, which include multiple Hmong songs. What I've learned in my Hmong language class has helped me read the slides and be proficient at my responsibility. This is a strong example of what one of the world language goals is to develop skills for the local and global community. Please notice that the Hmong students in my generation are losing their ability to communicate with the Hmong speaking community, including the immediate family members. This Hmong class helps me and other students to be confident and learn the language that is disappearing from their own culture. This class helps us to keep the language of my culture alive. I've also noticed that my own classmates without Asian background and without Asian background are able to be in that class and still having an enjoyable time along with me. I respect the research and the review of the World Language Program the district has conducted. However, I disagree with the decision to eliminate the 2 Asian language classes that Asian students identify with. As a Hmong student taking the Hmong language class, I was disappointed that I nor my classmates were asked about our opinion and how this decision would affect us. The idea of not offering any Asian language classes as a world language, but rather condensed into a year-long course of history is an act of microaggression. I stand before you giving my testimony and hope that you will see the empowerment of Hmong language class and ask you to measure this decision against the equity commitment. Thank you.
We have Mackenzie Hurlis, followed by Joshua Miller.
Hello, how y'all doing tonight? My name is Mackenzie Hurlis. I'm a senior at North High School and a current student in Japanese 4. I'm a former student in Hmong Language 1 and 2 and an active member in North High School's Hmong Club. I came here today to tell you about my feelings and thoughts on the recent termination of Hmong language and Japanese. As someone who loves and appreciates all cultures and spent 5 years learning various languages, the removal of my 2 favorite languages felt like a slap in the face. I was disappointed, angry, sad, and I even said a few no-no words. I dedicated the 3 years I've been at North to Japanese and the Hmong language. I cannot imagine the pain, disappointment, and anger my teachers and classmates feel, not to mention the Hmong community itself. Those classes brought everyone together because we had a common purpose, learning the language and bonding with each other. Both Hiroko Nagai and Jackson Yang love teaching their languages. They have dedication to the languages and to their students. I got to know them, and it's safe to say that Jackson Yang and Hiroko Nagai are more than teachers to me. They're my friends, and I'll speak on their behalf. Hmong and Japanese are very useful languages, just as useful as French, German, or Spanish. There were multiple instances where I had to use Hmong to communicate to a customer at my job. Granted, it was very broken, but we were able to communicate, and I sympathize with the people who don't have English as their first language. It would have been tougher to communicate with them if I didn't have prior skill of speaking Hmong like what Jackson taught me. I want you to reconsider your choice, if not for me, then for everyone. And removing these languages feels like they're not being represented in the community. And I hope that you do reconsider this decision. And I want to bring up a point on just explaining things to people, because when I found out about what was going on, it was pretty blunt, I would say. I didn't really get a lot of information, and I wish that we would get a lot more information in the future. It would be helpful for me and everyone else. I hope it didn't waste any of your time. Thank you. O chao. Arigato.
Mr. Miller approaches. Next up will be Susan Kishel.
Thank you, Superintendent Johnson, Dr. Nordine, and the Eau Claire School Board. Whenever there's deletions to the curriculum, I'm very concerned about that. I believe the richness of our curriculum here is a benefit for children and the community. And I kind of only recently read the executive summary, and a lot of good points in there. The executive summary and the Hanover Research Group promotes languages very well. And I'm sure everyone here appreciates and understands the importance of languages in our schools. 2 points I did disagree with the Hanover research was that they judge it on how much it's used in your job, but nobody questioned how much you use geometry at your work or literature or history on a day-to-day basis at your job. So judging how much you use language at your job, I don't agree with that. I don't also agree on the regional use of a language, because languages, most Americans are going to take languages to communicate in that language in their life. What languages do, they help you understand your own language better. You see it from a new point of view. There's culture, there's history. These are all important things in languages that are not met by, is that your job and are you going to speak it on a day-to-day basis? Getting on to actual cuts being proposed. My question was, before the cuts were proposed, what was done to save the programs? Were they promoted? Do people, as I said before, I'm sure everybody knows there's Spanish. People probably know there's French. Maybe there's German, Hmong, Japanese. How many students coming up on age to take these courses even though they exist? And the executive summary is saying that you want to have more than 15 students per class. And I'm sure the distribution is pretty wide. You probably have a lot in the upper languages, and you have fewer as you get down to the bottom. Were any of these languages promoted as being opportunities for people? For instance, if you have a low enrollment, you're going to have a good student-to-teacher ratio. Maybe think about taking one of these classes. Or Japanese is the only high school in the state that I believe offers a full Japanese course. That's pretty unique. Hmong, it's unique for the culture here. And also, if you spread students from the course of the more to the course of the few, you help the workload of the people who might be overloaded with courses. So in order to meet this 15-person goal per class, I think efforts should be moved to save the classes by encouraging them, promoting them, let people know they exist. And then also, when courses get small and they don't have the support, then the courses aren't much fun. And I know some of the courses are done by distance learning, and some of the courses are done by sharing teachers. And if the course isn't fun, people are going to re-enroll. And if they don't re-enroll, they're smaller, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I don't have the information about what was maybe done to promote these courses and help them become stronger. Only about half of the students actually take these courses, but if they knew about these courses that weren't as popular as others, maybe they could pull in more instead of half, maybe get 60, 75% of people. And then you have a richness of courses. So I just hope that the school district might still consider ways to promote these lower enrolled courses to make them stronger and to keep the richness of the curriculum more intact. Thank you.
Next is Susan Kishel, followed by Sheng Elizabeth Lohr.
Hello, Superintendent Johnson and board members. This fall, I gave many, many hours of my personal time telling my friends and my acquaintances and total strangers why they had to vote yes on the referendum, because it was so important that we take care of these essential building needs and didn't have to cut the other things that our kids are enjoying in this district right now. Then I turn around and I heard that they were dropping Japanese, and my heart dropped. I felt disappointed. I felt a little bit played, to be honest. I've heard that it's being cut at the end of the year. I've heard that it's being phased out over a few years. I've heard that nobody's cutting any programs. I've heard all of these things in the last 24 hours. And then to hear that you are removing Hmong class from the schools too, with the huge Hmong population that we have in Eau Claire, I don't see how it can be justified. You have a Hmong story cloth hanging on the wall in this room, but your actions speak a lot louder than your interior decorating choices. That's all I have to say.
Following Ms. Lohr will be Kim Kronk.
My name is Sheng Lohr, and I'm a resident here in Eau Claire County. And anyone who knows me knows that I'm completely invested in Eau Claire as a whole in terms of professional, political, or personal means. So today I am here to speak from a personal lens and be a little bit vulnerable with you all. So a little background about me. I am a child of 2 Hmong refugee parents. My 3 older siblings were born on refugee camp. I was fortunate enough to be the first child in my family to be born here in America. And so growing up, I often struggled a lot with my racial identity. So much like Ha, we have very parallel stories. I was never American enough, and I never really felt Hmong enough. I didn't feel confident in speaking my native language. I was insecure and often embarrassed to speak publicly because I wanted to fit in with my English-speaking peers. It was only until I turned 15 that I begged my mom to let me switch from a Catholic school to attend a public school, where I was finally exposed to Hmong peers that looked like me and spoke like me, and helped me feel pride and not embarrassment in speaking my native language. I wanted to learn Hmong so much that I got enlisted into a more formal class at the Wausau Hmong Mutual Association, and this taught me how to read, write, and speak in Hmong. And to share how much this meant to me, I actually gave up my whole summer so I could attend this course. It gave me confidence and skills to allow me to stand here today affirming that I'm a much more fluent Hmong speaker. I tell you this story because, full circle, my 15-year-old niece, Selena Kashiaya, is currently faced with similar challenges. She is a student at North High and is a second-year student of Mr. Jackson Yang, who teaches the Hmong language course that we all know. So I'm here also on behalf of Selena to give her a voice. Selena has shared with me her disappointment in learning that Hmong language will now be merged into a Hmong history course or social studies course. She has expressed to me that she felt confident getting a formal education in Hmong and was now able to showcase her language skills in a school and social setting. Selena shared with me that many of her friends, since they found out, who were also not asked about their feedback, started a group chat to talk through all of these emotions that they had. They are very much against the decision of this merge, and they are also very against the elimination of the Japanese course. Not only is this communicating to my niece and her friends that their voice is not important, but a sense of message to the rest of our community and the larger community that our language and our voice is not important. I know that my experience with school board professionally, personally, and politically has always been centered around equity and inclusion. So I am a little bit confused as to how things went wrong when it came to making this decision. There was not only a lack of transparency, but also a lack of inclusion when it comes to the engagement of staff, teachers, students, and community. So therefore, I'm asking today very reasonably for transparency, accountability, and to help us understand how this decision came to be. I would also like to have more open lines of communication and ongoing dialogue with impacted staff, teachers, students, and members of our community. I would also like to have a reversal of this change. And I would like to lastly have a supportive and inclusive foundation for future possibilities to further expand the Hmong language course, the Hmong history as two separate and equally important subjects, as well as reinstating the Japanese course.
Next is Kim Cronk, followed by Brian Renton.
Hi, my name is Kim Cronk and I live here in Eau Claire. And I want to say thank you for allowing me to speak, but I also am just really moved by all of the speakers that came before me. I don't have anything really official written out, so I just think I'm going to speak from the heart. I come, today here as a mother who had 3 children go through the Eau Claire school system, and now I have a granddaughter who's also going through the school system as well. We don't have enough time tonight to really talk about, or for me to be able to share stories of obstacles and challenges and discrimination that my children experience going through the school system. But they also have really key people in their lives, teachers, coaches, and others that really encourage them to see themselves in our community, belonging in the spaces in school and within the curriculum, very much pulling out pieces that they had to learn on their own, but yet there were people that really tried to empower them to embrace their roots, their culture, and their history. And I'm confident tonight in that spirit, along with the actions that Shang had shared with you, that you will utilize that empowerment spirit because you are here to represent our and families going through the school system. When I think about our community that just agreed to spend millions, literally millions, in additional police positions and correctional positions within our city and county, that is because many people believe that is a solution to create safety and reduce violence within our community. I believe and know, and many others agree as well in our community, that really what creates safety is building relationships, empowering our youth, embracing the rich heritage and cultures, languages that we have within our community, and teaching our youth the truth. Erasure is violence. So when we make decisions to remove languages from the curriculum and reduce youth's opportunity to see themselves, that is violence. And none of us want to be associated with that, but let's call it what it is. We have an opportunity for our youth to really be empowered and to learn about one another. My son took a Hmong language class for a summer at UWEC, and I was so excited for him because he had an opportunity to learn something that was really difficult, by the way, very, very difficult. But he embraced the challenge, and he also was able to put himself in a position to say, I'm learning something as a new language. He also studied Spanish, but I'm getting the sense of what people have to go through every day to come and be bilingual in the school, or having to learn English at all and go through the school system. So we have an opportunity to connect rather than disconnect our youth. As far as equity and diversity and inclusion, the school system, the city, parts of the county really made a strong commitment to action in the last couple of years. That missed 2 of my children going through the school system and the tail end of the 3rd. But you made a commitment to equity and diversity and inclusion, and words like that, especially from white-bodied people such as myself, they become just that. They become just words. They're buzzwords with no action behind them. And so the result of the decision that hopefully can be reversed is just that. It's a buzzword. We're not really fulfilling the obligation that we have all spoken, but we need to follow it up with action. I think having, people that are most impacted by the decisions made is also becoming really a buzz-like phrase. And we aren't too late to do that. I think we have a lot of, wealth
Sorry,
and
Ms. Cronk, that's your time.
heritage in our community that we really need to tap into. So I'm hopeful that you make the decision to do that.
Next is Brian Renton, and then Jody Fiesing-Ritter.
Good evening, Board. I look at the Eau Claire school system as an extension of the city of Eau Claire itself. When we ask people, why do you move to Eau Claire? It's the same reason why we ask our parents, and you should ask yourself, why do you send your children to Eau Claire School District? You ask yourself, what makes Eau Claire special? We have things that other towns don't have. We have the Confluence Center. We have the farmers market that we all enjoy, or most of us enjoy. We have culture that you don't see in many towns. I've lived in 9 states. I've lived in 26 houses. I've lived all around this country. And Eau Claire is the best place I've ever lived. I love it here. And the school district I thought was representative of the city of Eau Claire. Culture is a big thing that we have here, and I see a good culture in the school district of Eau Claire. But we need to embrace that, and we need to treat special things special. From what I've heard of my son, and I'm probably going to mess up the name, but Mrs. Nagai, thank you, is something special that we need to embrace, like Eau Claire has embraced so many special things that we have. We should encourage the growth and not take it for granted. And those positive influences, we just need to push further onto our children. I took my son, or I entered my son when I moved to Eau Claire into a private school district because I didn't know any different. I didn't know Eau Claire. I didn't know this. I was scared because I didn't know what to do. I was a young parent. But I pulled him out of private school in 5th grade because the school district. And I'm so glad that I did, because my son has 2 passions. Arts, which he is really into jazz and really into orchestra, and Japanese. Besides the traditional computer games and stuff like that, those are the 2 things that he talks about more than anything else. And without those things, I wouldn't see a passion in my son, and I wouldn't have the young man that I have today. And I wouldn't want to see that for any of the parents that we have. And thankfully, he's deciding to take Japanese further into his postgraduate. He's graduating this year. He's going to go to Mankato State. He wants to be a pilot, and he thinks that the Japanese and piloting is going to be a good thing for him. And he's already reaching out to see how he can utilize that skill set that he has on a worldwide level. So yeah, we'll be talking later. I do understand, and I heard you hear things. I understand that this topic has come up in the past, and I didn't know that because this is the first I've heard of it. And then I asked myself, because I'm a big promotion guy, what do we do to promote it? My son, he's also in orchestra and jazz. And I know in the seniors and juniors will go down to the middle or grade schools and they'll get excited about it. Because I remember my son being excited about it when he came. I think it was like a 5th or 6th grade, or 6th or 7th grade. And he's like, hey, Dad, they got these awesome jazz and orchestra programs. He's like, I think I want to play the bass. Which is great because he was like that tall, but bass like that big was kind of fun to hear. But truly, and he's a solid bass player if you've ever heard him play. But again, the passions that these things have. Have we ever thought about doing things like that to promote Japanese? Or I didn't even know that Hmong was on the chopping block. I mean, that blows me away for being a Eau Claire resident that we were considering dropping Hmong altogether. But if we considered actually doing those types of outreach programs to the young students to get them excited about things and explain the cultures that the Eau Claire School District has to match what the city of Eau Claire has for culture, they should mirror each other. And I feel like when we do this, they're not going to mirror themselves. We're going to have a separation between the city and the school district, and I just don't want to see that. So in closing, I think we can do more to follow our mission statement to inspire, prepare our students to be creative, fulfilling, responsible lives, because Japanese is the reason my son is going to have that mission statement stamped on his back when he walks out of here. And if I can, I'd like to give my last 20 seconds to you to give your closing statement. If you can do it quickly. Sorry, we got a pinch. It might be too late. I did want to hear it, though. That's why I was excited about it.
We're over our half hour of allotted time as well. Seaboard, we're happy to hear written comments as well if you've got extra.
I plan to send them.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Jody Fiesing-Ritter, followed by Pearl Jean.
Thank you. I'm Jody Tessingbitter. I'm a 29-year resident of Eau Claire. I know that the school district is deeply committed to EDI issues, and I'm very grateful for your work. I also know that as an employee of UW Eau Claire for the last 29 years, that I too have made mistakes using my white lens to make decision-making. I have had an absence of transparency. I've taken what I think is good information and made a decision. And I've also made mistakes, and I think you've made a mistake here today, and all of the comments that you've heard make it clear to me. I want to share why I think it's a mistake in 3 conversations. One of those conversations is with a former student who is one of the students who actually lobbied to start the Hmong class in the first place. I'm a college coach at UW Eau Claire, and he was my freshman college mentee, and he said to me, I knew more Hmong in kindergarten than I do now, and I can't talk with my grandparents. It's one of the reasons why I was so excited to be able to take Hmong language at UW Eau Claire. And he was so passionate about it that he lobbied, and the school district responded, and he brought the class on. I'm so proud of you for that. And the second conversation happened this past weekend when I went to Iowa City to pick up my neighbor, who is a PhD chemistry student there and a graduate of Memorial High School. She took Japanese for 4 years, tested into the highest level of Japanese at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, graduated from UW Eau Claire in 3 years, and went on to Iowa State, where she is, the University of Iowa, where she is studying chemistry. And the conversation in the car on the way home with her sisters, it was a wonderful road trip with her 5 sisters and I, talking about all of them who had taken Japanese. One of them is currently a senior at Memorial High School. How empowering, how validating, how they were able to see themselves in the curriculum, how they had a diverse teacher. It was their only teacher of color that they've had as students. And how sad they were that we have made this mistake of eliminating that course. The third conversation happened in the car on the way here with my 2 white sons, who said to me, "What do you mean they're going to get rid of the only Asian languages? That means they're only going to have Western languages." You've supported for them the white supremacy that they see in our community every single day. They need teachers of color, teachers who don't look like them, teaching languages that are not the language they hear at home. We can do better. I know you will. Thank you.
Pearl Zhang is Drew Vu, excuse me.
Hi, my name is Pearl Zhang. I'm a freshman at North High School. I'll keep it short. I'm disappointed in this decision. Not only have you guys decided to end Asian language classes, but you didn't confide in the students and teachers you are affecting. My peers and I know that the plan is to add Hmong language into social study class, but learning a language takes time. So many people from my community are losing our language. We don't have a country nor a homeland. And throughout my whole education at school, I've always been asked if I was Chinese or any other ethnicity. I've struggled with my race and ethnicity my whole life. This language class isn't just a class for students. It's a place for my peers and I to come together to share and validate our experiences in the school system. You eat out at our restaurants, you pick and choose what you want from our culture. And like somebody said, you have our bandao on your wall, but you don't know our history. And it seems like you guys don't respect it, taking out Asian language classes. I may not be as important as other speakers that you have listened to, but I am a part of the group that you're affecting. I ask that you guys have transparency in the process, and I ask that you guys think about the future students that will be affected by this decision. Thank you.
This is Drew Vu.
Hello, good evening. Nyojong, konbawa. My name is Drew Vu, and I'm the executive director of the Hmong Association. And I just felt so saddened when I heard that Japanese was being taken away and that the Hmong language was being merged into the cultural history class. First, I want to talk about Japanese, because I took that when I was in high school too. And it was the only language class that I could relate to, like a lot of the other students here. Nagai Sensei was an amazing teacher. And if you're going to take that class away, you're going to lose such a huge asset. Let me paint you a picture of Nagai Sensei. I'm walking down the hall and there's music booming out, okay? And when you get to the door, Nagai Sensei says, "Irashaimase!" That is Nagai Sensei. She brings so much joy and color into our students' lives. And if you're going to take that away, you're going to take someone so special. So I took Japanese 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then I went off to college and I took Japanese 1 and 2 at the university level. And then I did something that I thought I would never do. I traveled across the ocean to Japan to teach English at a summer camp for a whole summer. And when I got there, I did not feel lost. I felt like I was one of the Japanese. Even some of the Japanese folks there thought I was Japanese because I spoke it so well. So, domo arigatou gozaimasu. These are the experiences that we get here in the Eau Claire School District. And I love Eau Claire. I'm a product of the Eau Claire Area School District. And I don't ever want any of the students to lose that experience. I also wanted to talk about the Hmong language class too. Of course, you know me, you look at me and I'm Hmong, right? I grew up not knowing how to read or write my language. I can speak my language very well. I'm so fluent in it when I was young because my parents were like, you go to school, you learn English, you come home, you speak only Hmong. So I was very fortunate that my parents really instilled that language in me, but I didn't know how to read and write because the Hmong language is such a new written language because that language was taken, our old written language was taken away from us. I had to teach myself how to read the language when I went to church, to learn it through hymns. I was a 5th grader at that time. I didn't learn how to actually write the language that I spoke until I was in college. Why? Because it was not accessible to me. My history was not in the textbooks. It felt like who I am was not important enough. The history that we had with the Americans was not important enough to be put into the school books. And so I don't know if you guys know this, but I actually worked for the school district for 7 years. And I taught at Locust Lane Elementary School. And I actually started as a Hmong language class, but it turned into a Hmong club. And it was so great. All of our 4th and 5th graders came together and they felt so at home. They felt like they could talk and laugh and reconnect at certain subjects that we talked about. And it got to the point where other kids who were not Hmong wanted to join the Hmong club. And so it was such an amazing time because not only at that time we were starting this club at Locust Lane, but that was also the time when the Hmong language class and history also started at that school district. So I want you guys to know my time is up, almost up, but if you take these language away, you're taking meaningfulness away. And we know that children learn best when things are meaningful to them. They catch it, they retain it better, and they're more successful. So I hope that you don't take these meaningful classes away from them. And that's all I have to say.
That concludes our public forum for the evening.
It must have been a mistake. I sent in public comment. I'm not sure. Okay, do you mind if I go?
I didn't pay.
I'll be quick.
I guess
a different
Carlson is right.
David Carlson, a resident of Eau Claire. There's a group that hasn't been represented tonight, and that's combat veterans. You'll hear from a lot of, especially predominantly white communities, that the first time that like white soldiers, white basic trainees, boot camp trainees, whatever it may be, the first time they experience other cultures and other, diverse populations is in the military. They come from communities like these, and the first time they're exposed to a lot of those things is in service. And I think that part of the reason for that is Black and brown people are disproportionately represented in the military service, especially in infantry. I was an infantryman. I did 2 tours of combat in Iraq. The units that I served with were disproportionately represented by Black and brown soldiers. The infantry are the ground pounders. And so for me, I take offense to the fact that there is a vast history of Black and brown, Japanese, Hmong, Black supporting the defense of our country. And this area of Wisconsin claims to be so pro soldier and armed services and patriotic, but we forget the contribution of so many diverse populations to the defense of this country. The very liberties that we have right now, the fact that we can sit here and open debate and safely discuss this with each other is due to service members. And so the Hmong population, for instance, I remember back in 2004, 2005, anti-Hmong rhetoric that went all throughout this area. And I learned in college at UWEC that this was something that occurred regularly, you know, every 10 years or so, the anti-Asian hate that came through with COVID. And so how does this connect to that? Well, everything that you take away from representing us, representing Black, brown in this population, it gives a little bit more space to that racism, to that discrimination, to that hate. Every single decision that every single time we are excluded from a certain space, that space becomes filled with that hatred, especially in these areas. And so this is bigger than that just, are we going to collapse a couple of classes into one class? Are we going to condense something because there wasn't enough student, enrollment? One, like previous speakers said, there needs to be more proactivity then in advertising and promoting these classes if there isn't enough student enrollment. But the thing you shouldn't be doing is considering taking these out of this space, because what you're doing is taking away from the tools that we have as advocates and activists in this community to continue creating space that is safe for Black and brown people. And so the decision that you make is directly tied to equity, diversity, inclusivity in this community. Directly. I know a couple of you on here who are sincerely some of the most dedicated advocates that I know. I'm hoping that every person on this board shows that your commitment is the same as those individuals that I've worked with before. I appreciate your time. Sorry that I wasn't on the list, but thank you very much.
I have 2 minutes, please, to speak as another service member about the impact of ed. I promise I came in late, so I wasn't able to put my.
I understand that, but we have given now over an hour to it. We've had an extra speaker. We do have rules for sign up. You're welcome to send us written commentary, and I apologize, but we do need to move on with the rest of our meeting. Thank you. This time we'll turn to our regular reports. We start, as we always do, with the referendum committee. Commissioner Lyons.
The referendum committee has not met since the passage of the referendum. However, we are trying to get the committee together to talk about finance.
Thank you. Next is our legislative liaison, Dr. Johnson.
Thank you. Joint Legislative Council Study Committee on Shared School District Services will meet on Wednesday, November 30th. At 10 a.m. There are currently 423 school districts in Wisconsin, and our state government would like to actually a consolidation to begin taking place. Interested persons can watch the committee's meeting live on Wisconsin Eye. The committee will discuss its assignments as well as the following proposals. There is a list of 9 proposals. I think some of them are of interest, especially is LRB, so the Legislative Referendum Bureau 0590, relating to calculating a consolidated school district revenue with a new adjusted calculation, which is interesting that if you agree to consolidate your school district, you can actually then address your change of revenue. Kind of interesting. So click on the link for that. Wisconsin Public School Libraries will receive a record $52 million from the state's Common School Fund for the 2022-2023 school year. This amount is not only the largest ever and 7% increase from 2021-2022. Library aid from the Common School Fund may be used for the purchase of library books and instructional materials for school libraries, school library computers, and related software for use in the school library. In addition, schools may use these funds to purchase instructional materials from State Historical Society for use in teaching Wisconsin history. The Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction released statewide report cards on Tuesday, November 15th. In comparison with 10 larger school districts, ECSD is in the top 3 multiple categories, and in comparison with districts within UW system schools, CSD is in the top 4 of multiple categories. Voters on November 8th approved 64 of the 81 school district referendum questions placed before them, in 79% overall passage rate. Broken down by referendum type, voters in local districts across the state approved 32 of 42 referendum questions asking for additional revenue limit authority. Voters in local districts across the state approved 32 of 39 referendum questions asking for borrowing authority. It is noteworthy that the last time the passage rate of debt issuance referenda exceeded the passage rate of revenue limit referenda year in calendar year 2012. And the Eau Claire vote.
Johnson. Now move on to our consent agendas. For each of our consent agendas, the board considers the items one vote without discussion. Has been provided background information or has discussed each item at a previous meeting. Any board member wishes to discuss an item, it will be out of the consent agenda. Start with the superintendent's consent agenda. Items on the superintendent's consent agenda tonight are human resources employment report, gifts in the amount of $16,009.97, period of October 1st, 2022 through October 1st, 2022. Payment of all bills in the amount of $6,555,626.37. Net payroll in the amount of $4,611,780.91 for the period of October 1st, 2022 through October 31st, 2022. And financial report October 2022. A motion to approve the superintendent's consent agenda. Terry, when you are ready, please conduct a roll call.
Mercer.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes. Now move on to the board's consent agenda. The board's consent agenda includes minutes of board meeting November 7th, 2022, and approved key communicators group. Your motion to approve the board's consent agenda. All those in favor? Terry, just a minute to make sure she's got the motion in second. All right. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. And opposed? The consent agenda is approved. We have 2 items remaining on our agenda for the evening. The first is our regular monitoring of district results, which is of course combined with our focus on results meeting because we are on R2 academic achievement. At this time, I will turn the floor over to Superintendent Johnson.
Thank you. This summary of our compliance status for R2 went with our team going through this, looking from last year to this year. Some couple things that we wanted to alter the indicators, also based on certain types of screening or testing data. For example, this year, from the 2021 school year, we tested Forward exam, ACT, Wisconsin civics exam. If you remember from last year, we had some screeners and we utilized certain screeners last year because of the absence of the Forward exam and the Wisconsin civics exam, for example. So we thought that a couple months back when we started looking at this to be able to report for results, we would really use the data from those assessments. And I do have plenty of support with whether it's Kim Kohler, Michelle Radke, Mandy Van Vliet, Dr. Zhang occasionally with certain items with R2, but truly a team approach. Obviously, the effects of the pandemic are still real. We see it in our behavioral data. We see it in our behaviors. We know it with staff in asking the community. Last year, we talked about how to best spend ESSER $3. It was learning loss. And that's something that just doesn't disappear. Students over the past 3 years have lost a tremendous amount of that foundational knowledge that they needed. All sorts of the grades and departments. But, we made that commitment and we're making that commitment to bounce back. And in many cases, we believe that we are, but we still have quite a bit to accomplish yet. Going back a little bit to maybe 10 months ago, one thing that we had done, knowing that we probably would receive ESSER 3 funding, was to ask principals directly. This was not a district office decision that here's some money and this is how you will spend it. We needed to ask our principals, and they're in very close contact with their staff, what do you need? Probably heard me talk about this before. But probably the first step in addressing learning loss was many of our staff members expressed to principals about staffing for ELA, for math, not really other subjects, whether they would utilize that as an interventionist or switch a grade level or a department teacher out so then a more veteran person could help with interventions. We hired 50 people anywhere to be able to help with this. We talked about this a couple times in open session about what we have done with our system leaders in our data retreats, the data that we for the upcoming school year. So that's kind of the introduction to this piece. So next Monday at this time, when we talk about results, we get to have Van Vliet and principals sharing in more detail in the content area exactly what they are doing to learning loss, to help combat the achievement gap, very specifically to promote that growth of our students. So going into the report actually with R1 2A, so when we discussed this before in the red, obviously, and we shared this with you last Tuesday evening and for sure Wednesday morning, we had taken away many of the indicators for this. But for ELA and math, with 2-1A and B, making reasonable progress with few exceptions noted for ELA and math, especially with our forward data. We're hitting our goals. We're proud of achieving our goals in forward data in 3 through 8 in math and ELA. And we did break it down with you if you go a little bit further, Terry. We did break it down for you. Those were the overalls for 3 through 8. We did break it down a little bit more with 3 through 5 and 6 through 8. We're very concerned about our middle school achievement. Not just the growth, but achievement. And I know that's been going on for some time, as Dr. Hardebeck shared with me back in 2017. We can talk about that a little bit later, maybe a little bit generally, maybe a little bit specifically. I think one thing that has to do with all of these where we're not achieving as well is the ability to communicate and collaborate in departments and grade levels in a more formal way. Since 2017, we have not been doing that. We had plans to do so last year, but yet what happens with quarantining, the effects of COVID, Omicron, what have you, until probably February. This year, we're really excited about that, and we expect that to keep going up. But the elementary from that data bouncing back nicely for our ELA, if we could scroll down a little bit more. We have broken down by subgroups as well. Making reasonable progress with those groups. The Pacific Isle, in this case, not so much. Obviously, a very, very small subgroup, but in some cases close to pre-pandemic levels, but still not there yet on many accounts. If we would go forth a little bit more, Terry, again, proficient by race, percentages, scrolling down a bit more. Other demographics as well, looking at female, special education, non-special ed, ELL. Again, discuss there. If you've got some questions, we can answer those. We scroll down a bit more, using some of the other indicators there, switching ACT to ELA portion. ACT ELA portion right there. That's one thing that we noted is we are not making reasonable progress with indicator 3 with the grade 11 ELA ACTs. You can scroll down a bit more. We could continue to go down math. I think that's the last indicator, Terry. I think we had 11 for that first one. And then, once again, we wanted to tighten up the indicators, 11 indicators for just one subject area. So with 1-2B math, again, very proud that we're hitting our goals through 3 through 8 forward data. And again, we break it down from 3 through 5, 6 through 8, and getting a new curricula, I believe 2 years ago with middle school math, maybe a little bit of delay in our achievement there. But again, that's the work that we've been doing over the summer. I know it because I've seen it, as well as our grade level meetings and our department meetings this year, quite a bit of math work, working as teams of high school, middle school staff members as well. We could continue to scroll down. There we have more graphs with making that jump. Obviously not as happy with 6 through 8, although it had increased from last year. But, most proud of the nice bump that we had from 2021 to 2022. Not where we need to be, not where we want to be, but definitely an improvement. We can continue to scroll down. We'll get into the other departments. Science, positive growth in 4 through 8, with all but one demographic group experiencing the growth, and social studies growth on all grade levels on forward, with 4 and 8 actually eclipsing pre-pandemic levels. Also up in all demographic groups for social studies. And then we've got fine arts, FIED, world languages, and career and tech ed. Reasonable progress with exceptions noted in the evidence. Terry, if we could go down to if we could just go down to, let's just say FIED. Continue to scroll. It's going to be a little while. Initially we thought when we had discussed with FIED, we talked about grades. And since we have 3 professors here, as well as
page 33, Terry.
Former, oh, that's okay.
Thank you.
As well as former teachers. We felt it best to, and this is part of the curriculum work that we have ongoing. I think that could, if we were to go backward just a little with the multicolored.
That's still in world languages. 33 is.
It could be, it could be any of those non-core subjects with the grades. The differences between grades, A, B, C, D, from one school to another, whether it's middle school or high school, vary significantly. We've all been there. Even my teaching partner across the hall, way back when, we're teaching English 10, but there are times where we had some difference there in our grading. We grading 80-20, summative, formative. We grading 90-10. Were we allowing extra credit? Those types of issues. And what we had talked about in Executive Director Van Vliet could discuss this a little bit more, is the work that we're doing now is to get more of those common summative assessments, common formative assessments, to understand truly what's the growth, because there is that change between, for example, we've got 13 different elementary schools and 13 different teachers for PE. Well, and the same holds true with our middle and high school. So we don't think it would be as an exact representation, accurate representation, if we were just to use A, B, C, D. If we were to scroll a bit more with the various technology standards, again, and we can go back to this with, we wanted to monitor and report the enrollment in the PE courses. You have those for the past 7 years, I believe 8 years. Sarah, if we could go down to career technical ed. Those are the technology standards we would, that's perfect, Terry, where you have it. Could you scroll down just a little bit? Sorry, backward. Actually, it's this page and it's that next page. At the next future board policy meeting, instead of just placing technology, we thought it would be best to place technology integration. So Terry, if you could continue to move down, the same holds true for career, life, and technology. career and technical education. I wanted to propose that as well. DPI language, common language. So again, monitoring, reporting enrollment in the career and tech ed courses, same type of data. If we were to scroll down. Now with indicator number 2, and this is where we had
That makes sense.
Commissioner Zur had a couple questions this morning, wasn't able to get those to her until probably 10 minutes before closed session, but we could certainly talk about them a little bit more in detail. And I can share them with the entire board too, about career and technical education, our attention to, not just grade distribution or district-wide assessment data. But really, if we were to scroll down a bit more, is that, we go down even more.
The state.
Really including for R22, for our kids to be aware of and academically prepared for post-secondary opportunities to fit their individual needs and goals. That's where we really wanted to redo this. So if we were to scroll down a bit more, we really changed that indicator of percentage of students that are college and career ready in our district, defining ready, the work through DPI, the work through the state. We did put down as well in the narrative, but there's a lot of collaboration we needed. CISA with CVTC and evidence, taking away all those indicators, really taking all 6 away. All of those should be deleted. The rationale is that our redefining ready form, Mandy can allude to that a bit, or others, that'll have the necessary information for us to achieve compliance in the future on this indicator. So I know it was a lot. Exactly go piece by piece, but really from a results perspective, we wanted to, with the experience we had over the summer with R3 and 4, to really boil things down a bit more, not have as many links, but really to focus in on those 3 measures. And at this point, we'll take questions, comments, concerns from the entire group.
Thank you, Superintendent Johnson. We will, as you mentioned, open for discussion and questions.
Does that make sense? And I'm not.
Dr. Bika.
So with world languages as part of R2, I take this as an opportunity. I feel like this is the first time that I have been significantly challenged by our coherent governance policy. And just speaking very honestly, directly, I don't know what to do next. Why world languages comes up for me, sort of in particular here, is that I was a new board member. And I can't take any credit for it because the development had all happened long before I arrived, that I sort of got to, kind of ride the wave of the Hmong culture course and Hmong language courses. And so I don't think I would have predicted a move toward their termination. And so my question is, like I said, I don't really know how to proceed. And I would look to, others to think about, like, what is the best course of action? So I feel like I said, I now feel very challenged by our governance model, that I don't know what the next step is. But I know that I feel like I would like the opportunity, that is as a formal agenda item, to talk about world languages. And as it relates to, it could be R2, it probably relates to other policies as well. But anyway, I look to others for ideas about what is the proper next step with the governance model. I think about we certainly had, I was reflecting on a work session that we had where we had written case studies where we have practice working through issues where we were in a situation like this. And so I want to say that it is happening now in real time, I think. And I see it as an incredible opportunity for us. So how we might sort of seize that opportunity best.
Commissioner Zur.
So I have a lot to say about R2 outside of world languages, but I'm just going to speak to that right now. And this has been a significant point of concern for me since the Friday when it was announced. And I think that there are parts of this that are very challenging from my perspective in our governance model. Because quite simply, I believe that there are multiple multiple board policies that perhaps are non-compliant if this decision goes through. I think that there are multiple places where where those policies were not met, and the spirit of our board policy, the thing that flows underneath all of it, which is OE2, has been incredibly challenged by the decision. And I don't know if non-compliance is the right way to get anything done related to stopping this from happening. And I don't know where we actually have a mechanism by which to stop it in our policy, because there's actually not specifics written into it related to this. I think the only way, and to be perfectly honest, I think that there's not, I think R2 is probably maybe the least affected of the policies that I see. I see probably R4 of the result policies probably more impacted by world language study and the decision to at least move away from the foreign or the Asian languages in our curriculum. I think a primary for me is OE2, OE7, OE8, and OE5. I see violations in all four and R4 of our governance policies. And I think the only list, what was that? 2.7, 7.5, OE8, OE5.5 through 5.7, R4 in general. I think the only way for us to figure out what to do with this is to get it on an agenda as soon as possible and to play out a case study in real time. Because I don't think that we can, first of all, deal with the change in world languages and how the board is going to act in that regard. And if it's something we want to act on, I don't know how we do that, but we need to figure that out. And then second of all, how are we going to deal with policy violations when it's maybe the end result doesn't violate the policy? I would argue maybe with R4 it does. But I don't know. It's a conundrum. And I don't think that talking about it in the context of R2 is necessarily the right spot. I think it needs something else. I think we have to ask some questions. We need to hear more from the administration. We need to perhaps just get more out on the table than we have time for this evening. That's my thought on it.
Commissioner Clements.
Thank you. As a matter of procedure, I'm not the parliamentarian of our body, but in terms of being troubled by how do we work within our governance model honestly, but recognize that it is a framework for governing and not a straitjacket for governing. And so as you were talking, I was trying to find our matters for how items are brought up for discussion, but without finding that specific entry, at least so far, is we can choose to evaluate any of our policies or any of our governance policies at any time. So, I think it's a matter of how do we get that on the agenda, and then how do we talk about it in a way that allows us to explore the issue and express our feedback to it. Make sure the administration is prepared for that counter. But still kind of work through that within the framework that we've given ourselves. Again, I'm looking for that entry in our rules of order, but
the entry does not exist.
What's it?
The entry does not exist. So the scenario that you brought up, it's a discussion in agenda setting. And if it's unable to come up in agenda setting, then the other piece is not approval of agenda until actually item comes up. But that process though is not currently in the, it's in the Racine one. So.
Commissioner Lyons.
I believe though, at the end of the meeting, we can request items to be put on the agenda through agenda setting. Is that not correct?
We don't have a formal mechanism anymore. There's like, this sets as like, you can request things on the agenda at any time. We don't have a formal mechanism. I don't think any of us are going to fight having things that the board wants to see on the agenda. It may be valuable to draft and add in a formal mechanism, but that's something that we elected not to have just for agenda setting. Certainly if we have, some discussion tonight on what, goes on, we will discuss it tomorrow as well as for a timeline.
Well, I would like to see not only a discussion around the languages, but many of the points that were brought up tonight. I would like to see the full report. I also believe that there's a promotion issue that underlies this. And is this essentially a fiscal issue? Because then it gets into the finances, and is this the area of the district that we're interested in cutting? I personally say no, but then that gets into budget gets into salaries, and it's all tied into if it's a fiscal issue.
So before I come back to you, Commissioner Clements, I'll just point out that there's two issues here. One is the decision itself, and one is the process by which the decision was made, which I think is where Commissioner Zur is referencing potentially being non-compliant with some of the operations. We do have a mechanism for addressing the decision itself, and it's BSR 4.4. The board may change its results and operational expectations policies at any time, thereby shifting the boundary between board and superintendent areas of responsibility. The board will respect and support any reasonable interpretation of its policies by the superintendent, even though the superintendent decisions may not be the decisions the board or its members may have made. This is a curricular decision area in which the superintendent has authority to make the decision. The board, under any reasonable decision, has committed to supporting the superintendent's decision, even if we do not like the decision. I think it is clear that many of us do not like this particular decision and may have wanted it made a different way. However, without changing our boundaries, we are bound to respect that decision. The board, if we as a body feel that this is an unreasonable application of our policy, we can rewrite those policies to make it official. That would be a decision that the board has to make as a whole to say this, we find this unreasonable. I don't know that I'm ready to call it unreasonable. I think it's within the superintendent's domain to choose the course of curriculum and instruction. The other side of it, we can also rewrite policies in the operations. I do have grave concerns that some of the operations were not followed, at least to the spirit, and I would wager to the letter. I think 2 and 7 especially under our operating expectations, I don't think have been met in this case. I think there is some argument for 5 and 8 as well, but I'm less personally concerned about those. So I think as we discuss this and we think about what needs to happen, it's important to recognize that there are 2 sides to this. The overall decision is the superintendent's unless the board is going to rewrite the policy to say that he may not make this decision without board consent. I don't want to go down that road personally, but and then the operational expectations in violation is its own, or in non-compliance, I guess, is its own. So there are process issues. Well, Commissioner Clements, and then we'll go back to Commissioner Zer.
Thank you. So I concur with where that authority is vested right now. I think based on our governance model, the avenue would be to investigate the particular decision in terms of how it is informed by our various operational and results expectations. I think that would be the way to examine that. And I guess there are different forks that I could foresee happening after that. Either the administration decides to change their decision, they provide evidence that supports their decision, or the board continues to consider other options, at that time. But I think that the way that we've still investigated it, is how a particular decision is affected by the policies we currently have. Thank you.
Commissioner Zer.
In the interest of decorum, I'm going to say hogwash. I think that this is ridiculous that we have to change a policy when something so clearly violates our policy. It violates our policy. And the spirit of everything that we have done and everything that we have written into this policy is violated. And if we can't, by mechanism, somehow or another, if I can't ask you guys to vote to put it on an agenda, then we are being strangled and we are being put in a straitjacket by a policy, by this governance policy that needs to be more flexible than it is. And I refuse to believe that by a majority vote of this body, we cannot ask for something to be put on the agenda and in whatever injunction put on it until a decision can be made whether or not it is in violation of policy. Then I think that the governance model is not serving the students and the community that we are charged to serve. So I sincerely think it's hogwash. And I don't think that we need to go through a months-long process of amending our policy while the course catalog is changed and those programs are no longer offered to our students come February or March of next year. No.
Well, the question that lies before the board is whether or not this decision is reasonable.
No, it's not.
Thank you. But the board itself must act. And then if it is not reasonable, we have to amend the policy in order to own that decision. That's the commitment that we've made. I'm not suggesting it is a very reasonable discussion for the board to have to decide whether this particular decision, which I think is clearly the superintendent's to make by our policy, is reasonable or not. That's the discussion that we need to have. And if the board as a whole finds it to be an unreasonable decision, then the board has to own it and control that decision going forward. That doesn't have to take a long time. But that's the decision-making process that we committed to. Dr. Farrar and then Commissioner Clements.
I do appreciate the focus on process and the ways that we might
use our existing process to remedy this situation. I will say that you can't get past the first page of this board governance policies, page 1, board preamble and our equity statement. I'm going to read from the equity statement. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm going to read part of it. The ECASD will explicitly recognize, examine, and address the systemic manifestations of oppression and racism in our district in all aspects of its governance policies, processes, practices, and outcomes. The ECASD will use a lens of equity in all decision-making and at all levels, where equity means ensuring opportunities for learning and experiences for all students, and especially for students who have been historically marginalized. The ECASD will invite, support, and collaborate with marginalized populations in our district and surrounding communities and create relationships and allyship based on respect, inclusion, trust, consistency, and accountability. We welcome the ways this diversity will deepen our shared understanding of the applications of our work, and we will work to amplify and prioritize these authentic voices. The ECASD, as a predominantly white system of administrators and educators, will make changes in the core organizational structures, institutional practices, and professional behaviors, actions of all privileged voices within our system, knowing that white people are the beneficiaries of racial inequality. I can't get past that in a situation in which we have just eliminated the 2 Asian languages, the 2 non-European languages, the 2 non-Western European languages. I conclude.
Commissioner Clements.
So, I have no quibble with, how we intentionally, many of us here contributed to that. The question is, how do we process that within our current governance structure? And, we have to take our governance structure as a whole and not choose to ignore the parts that address how do we bring things up that seek to be changed. I think we ensure that we could do that with all due speed, but do it judiciously, because we're here talking about doing this the first time. The next time may not be by people who have equity in mind when they are choosing to tinker with course changes or other issues with the way the district functions. So therefore, I think we must do so consciously of how this decision will be potentially utilized in the future. So, I think that it's a question that should be, considered. I'm just concerned with how do we make sure that we do that in a way that, we're not saying, well, we had this governance model, it was okay for 18 months, and now we're just gonna, take certain aspects of it back, such as approving every change to curriculum or something like that. But I think that we've discovered that on occasion, when we think that there is something that's being decided that's in violation of one or more expectations, what do we do about it? And I think we're a little bit of a loss of what exactly we do that doesn't blow holes in the way that we function. That's going to erode these values that we're attempting to make sure are permanent.
I, for one, am fine with owning the decision.
So as a point of order, we probably should get back to the feedback on R2, knowing I would request that fellow commissioners during your closing speaking time to reassert the sense of urgency of getting this particular item on the agenda, and that third person who is on agenda setting for tomorrow remind our president and vice president of that concern. But right now, it's just as a point of order, comments, feedback pertaining to R2 here, and I guess in an attempt to try to move us forward just a little bit. Superintendent Johnson, I would actually caution. I don't know if I heard you correctly in terms of maybe not looking at fine arts and physical education as intently as the other content areas. However, as I was pointing out to Commissioner Zur, and I looked, it's interesting when we look at the distribution of grade and whatever grade means, is that if you look at the distribution amongst the arts and physical education, it actually seems a majority of the marginalized groups had greater opportunity for achievement comparative to actually those other academic areas. And so it's one of those things, for me, I don't letter grades, I'm kind of moved past, but because you have it included, so then I said my caution would be is potentially are our practitioners in those particular areas, what is the lens that they are utilizing their pedagogy to be a little bit more inclusive of its delivery, that achievement is more possible amongst a larger group? Because for me, I'm because when we look at the other components there, I'm pretty sure everyone saw it, that the great state of Wisconsin, wider score gaps between actually Black and white students. You break it down, we are kind of just like right there. And so I just, my caution is, I think that's a little bit of value of looking at kind of what the fine arts, and for them to demonstrate that like achievement was possible over like a larger group. I think it's an interesting discussion to potentially have to see how that happened. And I guess I had a couple things, but just to kind of keep us moving, could you just, when you inserted or deleted all these other measures, you says the pre-ACT assessment will be used. Could someone just speak to what components of that pre-ACT assessment will be utilized as indicators of moving towards someone just.
Yes, I'll defer to the directors in the back.
The pre-ACT is replacing the ACT Aspire at the state level. And so that is in your math, English, science, area and reading areas. And so it will be very similar. They will get an ELA score, just like they do on the ACT. And it will have progression from the pre-ACT to the ACT. That'll be more comparable as you do those scores. And that will be taken at grades 9 and 10. So pre-ACT 9, 10, and then ACT and
So is the approach, if that makes sense, but is that approach, we're using that information in terms of to increase knowledge, not better performance on the ACT, correct? It's like, yeah, so or both, or like kind of how?
Yeah, and the state did make the change because the ACT Aspire was so different than the ACT. So they wanted to have a comparable measure that went through 9 through 11. And so it's on the same scale. So it's on the scale of 36, just like the ACT is. They can't achieve a 36 in grades 9 and 10. It does cap out at a 35. And so the first time they could get a 36 is in grade 11. So the progression is the same. The questions are very similar that would be asked in each of those measures.
Did you have further questions, Dr.?
And I maybe I see you scratch your head a little. We started to do the pre-ACT as a screener this year just to understand the type of data that it would give back to us. And we have started to utilize that as a screener to understand the types of questions and how we can integrate some of that, whether it's academic vocabulary, disciplinary literacy within all areas. So they've been analyzing the results from the screener to see what are some of the interventions that we can implement at a high school level in those areas to help students. What are their needs at a 9th grade level to help them achieve, at the level that they need to by the time that they do get to grade 11. And it is showing some of the gaps that we do, it will show some of the gaps that we do have in our curriculum also as we curriculum write.
Commissioner Sir.
So probably won't find this surprising, but I am really struggling with our career and technical education data. I don't think that we're making reasonable progress. I think that we are plagued by some lack of progress for a multitude of reasons. I am not only am I concerned about the lack of organization around it and the clear articulation of what that means for our kids to be career ready, because let's be honest, whether they go to college or they go straight to work or they go to technical school or they go to the military or whatever, they're bound for a job someday. And this is really important stuff. And it's really important that they articulate and take full advantage of their high school time to experience the full breadth of their interests so that they make great decisions, so that our kids aren't saddled with unneeded college debt, that they feel confident in their abilities and where they're headed so that they can be their most successful selves. The fact that we have less than a dozen industry recognized credentials in the Eau Claire School District is so far behind even tiny rural school districts that are our neighbors. It is appalling. I think it's something like 12. It was in the single or low double digits of getting a Microsoft Office certification, which is every single kid who works in Microsoft Office should have a Microsoft Office certification. We are so far behind in where we should be at with monitoring where our students are at in career readiness, that it's mind-boggling to me. And I have asked for, a bit more data, which you guys don't have that because it came in an email. That's some of the data that came to me 10 minutes before, but I did request that from a couple weeks ago now. And I just think that, and so we can look at those redefining ready indicators, and that was something that redefining ready can be a really great tool for monitoring career readiness, because you can aggregate that data out and you can actually see what is meant by that. So earned an industry recognized credential, 80% of our kids should be earning that. DPI considers you should have to have 2 of those when you graduate for it to be a career readiness indicator. We can't even measure some of the stuff in there yet. And so, I'm not saying that we're not trying. I'm not saying that we're not cognizant of the fact that it's a problem, but I am saying that alone is not, to me, progress. We need to have a well-articulated plan for how we are going to start organizing our student data so we can see this, and then increasing our opportunities and options for our kids so that they understand regional career pathways would be a really great step. Kid is in a regional career pathway, boom, they're career ready. That's it. End of story. They would hit all of those indicators. I think I am having a hard time accepting the reasonable progress on 2.2 and probably 2.1. And I think in order for that to be reasonable progress, there needs to be a very clearly articulated plan for how we are going to get a handle on our career readiness indicators for our kids in this district, because it is lagging very far behind our, and I know this because I work in this, but it's lagging very far behind many of our neighbors and certainly the districts our size in the state. And we have a lot of work to do to get our kids there. And a lot of really fantastic opportunities that our kids could be taking advantage of that we're not doing our best to get it to them. And so I don't know what to do about that. I don't know what to do about it. And I think I've been satisfied in the response that, wow, this is a mess and we need to get a handle on it. But some of the data points are really disappointing to me. And I'm not sure how to move forward with that, but I can't in good conscience. I just can't in good conscience accept that where we're at with career data. With that said, I'm going to end on the positives. I think that there was a lot of really good stuff here. I am really encouraged by some of the academic performance rebounds that we're seeing for our kids, particularly at the elementary level. I think we have a reason to be concerned about secondary, and I am excited to hear about what we're doing there. I think that middle level has concerned me for years, and it continues to concern me. Achievement gaps, we can't miss those. They're big. And I think we do need to talk about those. The part that was curious to me, and Dr. Johnson alluded to this because we commented on it, is where are we seeing those gaps lower? And what I would like to know, like why are social studies gaps significantly less? What's happening at social studies curricular level at the middle, like what's happening there? And how and within those co-curricular or I guess what we call them co-curricular, but really they're a rich and vibrant part of our educational experience for our kids, where we see those achievement gaps, at least in grade data, data looks a lot better for not only our students of color, but also additional, special populations. And I think that's of note and that's encouraging. But I just don't know that I can accept R2 the way that it is, because I'm really not sure if our career data is there.
Well, we've done it before when board members do not agree with either making reasonable progress or and if we're not making reasonable progress, then that's stated. And then, the interesting thing is the world language discussion and this with career tech ed, it's related. It's opportunities for children. We have 2 large comprehensive high schools. We have many, many opportunities for children. And I have spoken with our high school administration about how difficult it is to balance that. the needs, the desires, the opinions, you name it. It is difficult in large comprehensive high schools. And I think our staff does a wonderful job of delivering things. When it comes to the CTE component, I've shared that with you before. I actually have a meeting with CVTC tomorrow at 9:30 about this issue. I meet with our local consortia and talk about these types of things, and I do look at the data. I think, and I've heard this from previous administrations as well at the high school level, is that we offer many, many things, and placing another, okay, here's another program, and sometimes it's at odds with our staff, where staff lose out on opportunities or staff lose, but we have to think of the student first. And we have discussed, especially with CTE promotion. I would not point to Mandy to comment, but okay, we've had a world language study that you've heard about a bit here tonight and previously. We've also got your career tech ed that is really next up, and they need to hear this as well, what we're discussing. We share that with our principals at every principals meeting. Here's our two, here's what the board had stated. Although some principals and administrators are on tonight and they're hearing this, we want to make sure that all 24 of them get that information. But especially from a secondary perspective, and Kim meets with the secondary principals quite often. But it's those opportunities for kids, and I'm well aware of it. My own kids have benefited from it in a different district. Industry credentials, plenty of credits. Where we are behind with some things. We have done some things with partnerships for with industry, with local industry, but it's still not. It's not there. It's not where we want to be. It's far behind.
And just as a follow-up, if I can, I don't think it's that, I don't think it's necessarily that there's probably things we're behind on. Yes, I can agree with that. But I think it's just understanding how to look at career and technical education data as an indicator for student readiness. That's the part that I don't feel like we actually can show it. We might be doing it. It might not be an add-on. I think industry recognized credentials are an easy one because chances are they're already happening. It's just making educators aware that they can sign off on this for, it's probably already happening. And there's hundreds of them on DPI. We can pick and choose which ones we're going to offer. Microsoft Office, if every kid doesn't graduate with that, we've done something wrong. But like the fact, that we can't tell how many kids have taken 2 classes, health science 1, health science 2, or whatever it might be, medterm and Nat and Phys, whatever series of courses, how many kids are taking that in this career cluster? We know what the regional demands are. I can tell you the 4 top employment categories in our region right now. We should be able to show where our kids are at, in those 4 to 6 to 8 of the 16 career clusters, the top 8. How many of our kids are taking a series of courses in those top 6 clusters, right? Or are taking a series of courses plus a dual credit course because they're going to college for that specific field. We cannot, or if we can articulate it, it's not articulated here. And then how many of those kids are having, real meaningful work-based learning experiences, not just a job shadow or whatever, but like an actual internship with curricular attachments that's happening. We can't articulate that yet. And that is a disservice to our kids. We should be able to do that. And I'm not saying that we're not already doing it. I'm not saying that we have to add something on. I just think that we're missing, it's a blind spot for us that we can't see. And ergo, we don't know as a board that our kids are really hitting that mark. And so making reasonable progress might be that we have a plan to get all that together at some point. That might be the making reasonable progress. But to not have that yet, to not be able to articulate what career readiness really looks like for our kids. I don't know how to accept it. And I could accept it if those were perhaps not compliant or not making, or, you know, there's some sort of plan to get them up there. Because I think the rest of it, you're aware of what we need to focus on. We're going to hear about plans to get us there. I am happy that we're moving in the right direction in some very key spots, and I'm really happy of where we're sitting with districts our size and in UW, you know, system schools. I'm impressed with where we're at. I just think that career ed piece is it's really lacking in what we can prove here.
Commissioner Zerg, could I speak to that just a bit?
Please.
So we too share the same concern as you do, as when you think about CTE and the clear pathways and the work that needs to be done. We recognize that that is a need for our district. And so wish we had the capacity to do the work right now so that we could create a better picture of where we're at. And prioritize it as something that we need to work on. We do recognize that. But the reason why it's lacking is because we can't produce it for you. We don't have the capacity to do that work, unfortunately, right now. But not because we don't view that as important. We know the power and the data that it will give us and the power that it will help our students in understanding their pathways, and are in the process of developing a plan for that work. As I think Superintendent Johnson mentioned, at the completion of the World Language Review, we only have the capacity to do one program review at a time. The next priority for us was career and technical education, because we know that is in such great need. And we look forward to being able to develop this work, not only for you as a board to understand our progress, but particularly our students and how it can help guide them. And we hope to be there. I think that I understand the questioning on making reasonable progress with exceptions as noted. As we have done this work and gone through preparing this document, we have had conversations about, is it making progress with exceptions or is it failing to make progress? And I think probably would be helpful for all of us is to have a common understanding of what does it mean when we say not making or failing to make progress? Or what does it mean? Like, what is the indicator that we would say making progress with reasonable exceptions or with exceptions noted? So I think for us, where we fell is we are making progress, not as fast as we would like to. And I believe in that information that Superintendent Johnson provided to you. It shares why, progress has not been made as much as we'd like in the last few years. But we are working on it, but we're not moving as fast as we would like, which is why we did say reasonable progress with exceptions instead of failing to make progress. But perhaps that would be helpful to have a conversation around the definition of those so that we could be on the same page.
So not seeing any immediate in that last break, maybe there is more, and I don't want to cut conversation off, but also looking at the time and knowing that we have an additional agenda item, I think maybe we will have time to discuss more results as we go forward. If somebody does want to jump in, please light up your, so we can keep moving. The two things that I would like to request that we see in the future focus on results that I think I'm not going to ask for tonight. I think Commissioner Zer sort of touched on some of them, and you did as well, Superintendent Johnson, that concern about the middle levels. It's nice that they've shown a little improvement on some of those, but I'd like to hear what the administration's plans and goals are for our middle schools across the district and what is going to be done to hit those targets and get those kids moving. And then, as Dr. Johnson often points out, it's all well and good to move the needle and to be, in among our peers, but if we're not hitting and closing the gaps between our various subgroups, so that's another thing I'd also like to have some focus on as we talk about our results. What are the plans for making a real impact for students of color. There are some great points of growth here. There's some like real improvement for our ELL students in several of the categories. That's very positive, but obviously those numbers are not where we want them to be. Special ed, there's several places where it looked as though our Black students were actually falling a little bit this last year. And so I want to hear the specifics about what's going to be done to address that. Those are certainly priorities of the board. But without any other comments, we're at the point where we need a motion to approve to approve and accept R2. And certainly we'll have an opportunity to discuss and
Motion to approve R2.
I will second. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none, we'll call the question. The motion is to approve R2 as submitted. Oh, sorry. Question, Commissioner.
Thank you. So ordinarily we've kept track of comments that we've had. Who was doing that? Because I'd like to know what, those comments will be included with this item.
Sure. I did, because we didn't hold agenda setting after last one. I was not available and I failed to request Dr. B could do it before the meeting. So I got in between. I have not taken our discussion on world language. I will talk about it. Dr. B, I'm going to ask you to lead the debrief at the end of the night for us. And I go first, so I can address what I hope to do for agenda setting, and then that can be a part of the reflection as we go forward. So I haven't captured that. So I've only focused on basically after Dr. Johnson redirected us to the specifics of R2. Under strengths, I have that there is good progress in rebound data, especially in the elementary. Under weaknesses, I have how we look at career and technical education data as indicators, as well as concerns about middle levels and gaps between our groups. And then omissions, and I wasn't sure how to, commissioners, how to capture all of this, so you can give me more if you'd like, but I just set something down. Career and technical education data is lacking and needs improvement. And I think, Executive Director Van Vliet spoke to that, but I'm happy to add or edit in any way. This was sort of a spur of the moment. I realized, oh shoot, nobody is ready to take it. So I pulled it up and, but is there anything else that people would like to see added or edited?
Yeah, you could put in omissions clearly articulated, CTE data that monitors student career readiness, post-secondary readiness.
Clearly articulated CTE data that monitors student post-secondary readiness. Yes. Anything else? Did that answer your question, Commissioner Clements? So then returning to discussion on the motion. Seeing none, we'll call the question. Again, the motion is to approve R2 as presented. All those in favor, please say aye. 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 And opposed?
No.
No.
The report stands approved. We'll move on to our final regular agenda item tonight. That is a board development session on a temporary referendum financing plan. I'll turn it over to Abby Johnson and I believe some representatives from Baird.
Are you going to be?
All right. As you can see, Mike Clark from Baird is joining us, and he's got a presentation, and I will be scrolling through it. Mike, I think we are just about ready.
All right. Well, good evening and congratulations on the referendum. It may seem like a long time ago, but we have been working on some things to prepare for the financing for the referendum. And tonight we'll be going over some things, the current interest rate environment, and some preliminary thoughts on how to go about getting the financing in place and in a timeline to kind of give you a feel for what will be happening over the next several weeks if the process we've laid out is something you want to move forward with. So skipping to the interest rates, interest rates up in the upper right-hand corner is a 1-year snapshot of rates. And rates have been climbing since late 21. But we are, over the last few weeks, have experienced some declining rates, which is good. We are still within the estimates that we had used during the referendum process. And if you look at the longer term history of the interest rates, we're still at, when you go back to the early 90s, we're still at, kind of the mid-range in terms of interest rates. Back in the mid 90s, borrowings were in the 6 and 7%. So to be looking at borrowing still in that 4 to 4.5% range is still good. It's just kind of a bit of a change from where we were, a year or so ago. So still in line with targets though. So we feel very good about getting to meeting the expectation that was laid out during the referendum. The next slide is just kind of reminder of what the board's or the district's credit rating is. The district is currently a AA with S&P. We anticipate using S&P again on this borrowing because you have such a strong rating with them, and they know the district. Goals will be to come in less than the 40 cents. And actually, we're feeling pretty good about that 35-cent range. Minimize interest costs, minimize interest rate risk, which we'll be doing by issuing the full amount of the referendum at one time, and maximizing investment earnings. And this is something that's relatively new. One of the benefits of having increasing interest rates is the district has the ability to take the bond proceeds and invest those up until the point they're needed and earn interest on those dollars. And the interest income is potentially pretty substantial. And those dollars can be used for one of two purposes. One, for additional projects, which I know, having been with discussions with the district, that there were those projects that were not initially addressed in the scope of this referendum that it may be able to be included, or if cost of the targeted projects is higher than anticipated, it gives you a little bit of flexibility to cover those costs. The other use of the dollars is to use it to offset debt payments or to pre-fund the debt. This happens on occasion, but typically districts find that there are needs that they can use those dollars. So that's something that will definitely be benefited by the plan that we're laying out in terms of maximizing those investment earnings. There is a possibility, I'll talk about this now, that if you earn too much, that you may have to pay a portion of that to the IRS. The IRS gives you the district the ability to borrow on a tax exempt basis, but within that they want you to spend the money. If the money's not spent in the targeted time frame, the district will have 2 years, which I know the project scope is probably beyond that. If you earn above the arbitrage yield, you may have to rebate or pay the amount above the arbitrage yield on the unspent portion. But we've talked through with the district and looked at this. And if you would end up paying, you'd be paying with dollars you would not otherwise have had. For example, if we delayed borrowing $40 million and let's say you earn 4%, which is very reasonable in this environment, and you delayed borrowing that 40 million, you'd give up about $1.6 million of earning on that $40 million if you delayed it a year. And just looking at some preliminary arbitrage numbers, we're not even clear that you're going to even go over that rate and have to pay anything. But if you would, even if you set $600,000 aside to possibly pay that rebate, you'd still be $1 million to the good on the investment side for projects. So almost all the districts we're working with are moving forward with locking up the full amount, just because interest rates are a little more favorable right now. And we do think they're going to move higher, and they'll be able to earn more interest on those dollars. So, so the structure, the debt will be a 20-year period, which is the maximum term in Wisconsin. We will be issuing a bond anticipation note in the first phase, and this is being done because the district did levy additional dollars into Fund 39 in anticipation of the referendum, and we want to pay down that short-term note. So we'll be locking in long-term probably about $4 million less than what the referendum was approved for. However, the district will have the full amount of the referendum for projects, but just the long-term debt, because we have some dollars that we'll use to pay down the short-term note and then refinance the rest of that short-term note with some long-term bonds. We are anticipating about a 35-cent impact at the present time, which is below what was targeted. And we are building in a drop after about 3 years, just to give the district some levy flexibility. I know there was some discussion of some possible other needs of the district. And if the district doesn't need that drop in 3 years, it can levy in advance and pay down the debt more quickly if there's no other need for that drop. Again, we're anticipating a ban issue in December, on December 5th, and utilizing a parameters resolution. A parameters resolution was used previously in the district, and basically what this does is gives, if you go to the next slide, it talks about the parameters resolution. It gives the district more flexibility to lock rates, as opposed to, picking out your January board meeting and saying, this is the day we're going to lock our rates. The parameters resolution, the board designates to whoever they would choose. Typically, it's a administrator, and maybe administrator and a school board member, to lock rates on behalf of the full board. And this gives more flexibility in terms of trying to find a good time to lock your rates, as opposed to just having that one day that's your meeting that month, and that's you're going to lock rates. If it's a bad day, you may end up with a less than favorable result. But if it's a good day, it's great, but there's no way of really knowing. The parameters resolution opens up a window over a few months where the district can lock rates at a good time or a more favorable time, and not have to be tied to a specific board meeting. The typical parameters are the dollar amount. Again, the 98.6 is the full amount, but we anticipated paying that down with the dollars levied this year. Be less than that. If who has the authority to lock the rates, the district can decide who they want to be. Typically, it's one or maybe two people. And one thing, we need to make sure those people will be available to sign off on that day. So if anyone's, taking a worldwide cruise or something like that, they may not be a good candidate for that role. And then a maximum interest rate, maturity schedule, and then the ability to move the annual principal payments to a certain degree to kind of match what the interest rates are. And that's another advantage of the parameters resolution. We just have a lot more flexibility to kind of structure some debt. So if the interest rates are coming in better than we anticipated, we can move some principal up and pay it down more quickly. Again, why this makes sense in this environment is just the volatility we're seeing in interest rates. 3 weeks ago, rates were probably about 40 basis points higher than they are today. And again, being able to act on when you get a bit of a drop, to be able to act and again not be tied to a specific meeting is really helpful. Also, most districts have meetings on Mondays, and if you can get off Mondays on maybe on a Wednesday or Tuesday where there's less volume in the marketplace, it's definitely could be beneficial to getting a better rate. And then obviously around holidays, it's you know, if board meetings are lined up with or near holidays or even on holidays where the market may be closed but the school is still open, you know, those types of things also, the parameters resolution gives you more flexibility. The next slide is the timeline. Oh, excuse me, one more slide. One other consideration that some districts do, but not all, but just definitely want to make you aware of it. The district could engage what's called a pricing agent. So it's a third party to kind of give an additional opinion or monitor the rates that. So if Baird calls the district and says, well, we think tomorrow might be a good day. We've seen some good sales, you know, results, you know, the last couple of days, we're going to try to get this sold, you know, tomorrow. This pricing agent would look at comparables, look at the pricing, look at the rates, and, you know, provide some guidance, provide an opinion that, you know, that the pricing is in line with what's happening in the marketplace. There is a little cost to this. You know, we would open it up for proposals or bid it out on behalf of the district, and the district would select someone if they wanted to use this pricing agent. Like I said, it's used in some cases, not everybody does it, but I did want to make you aware that that is an option if you felt more comfortable with that, having another set of eyes looking at it in terms of as moving to closing, finalizing your rates. The district did not use a pricing agent on the last one a few years ago on that refinancing we did. But again, I just wanted to make you aware that that is an option. And now the timeline. So again, we're talking tonight. We'd be looking at board action. Again, this is the tentative schedule for the ban award. Again, this is the short-term instrument. And again, this would be providing the dollars to fund the projects. And also these would be the dollars you'd be investing to potentially earn additional interest towards potentially other project costs. And as well as adopting the parameters resolution on the 5th. Again, tentative, if the board would want to defer that, that's definitely a possibility. On December 21st, the ban closes and the funds would be wired to the district, deposited into a project fund, and then whoever the district, I know the district's looking at different options in terms of handling the bond proceeds. Whoever you're working with, then we'd work with them to wire the funds to the appropriate account. Mid-January, we would have the rating call. The district would also have a disclosure council call, which again is a legal review of the legal documents or the bond documents to make sure everything's in line. It's become more and more important over the years in terms of making sure there's no misinformation or, you know, factual error in the bond documents. We received the rating, then we'd begin marketing the bonds in mid to late January. You know, we'd monitor for a good time to potentially lock. We would, if we found that time, we would work with the district to get that approval, whoever the designated individuals were. And again, they would need to be available on that day. So again, when you make the decision of who those individuals or individual, again, it doesn't have to be multiple people, it can be one, who would be available over that time frame to sign off on finalizing those rates. And then the proceeds of the long-term bonds would be pay off the balance of the bond anticipation note. Again, we plan on paying some of that off with the levy from the 22-23 school year, and then hopefully have the band paid off sometime later in March and have the long-term rates in place. So I will take any questions that you may have. I know it was a lot, and I know most of you were not part of it the last time we used the parameters resolution, but it's something that worked well for the district in the past.
Thanks, Mike. Any comments and questions from board members? Well, then seeing none, I think we can continue to probably target December 5th for board action without objection. We'll put it on consent.
I think those resolutions would have to be not part of a consent.
Okay.
They need to be individual action roll call items.
Sure. All right. Well, then that settles that. We'll just put it on an action item reserved for board action then. So, all right. Thank you for hanging out late with us again tonight, Mike. And, we'll be back next week to move forward.
Okay. Have a good night. Thank you.
Cheers. So at this time, we'll move on to our regular debrief. I'll turn it over to Dr. Beek now.
Josh, do you want to start on this side?
Well, I wonder if I could go
Oh, you
first.
were
I'm sorry.
sorry about that. I forgot.
Yeah. So clearly there's a want to further discuss the world languages situation. So I think the easiest thing to do is simply add a segment into an upcoming agenda that under matters reserved for board action to discuss world languages and its application to policy. That will give us an opportunity to properly notice it so that we can discuss it in the right way, and it will give us a window to act if the board wishes to act on a myriad of different things. So I think that is my suggestion, and then I would say that tomorrow in agenda setting we could work with whoever I don't know who's the third member tomorrow.
I thought
I think it's
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
It's Wednesday.
It's Wednesday because this is the one that we rescheduled. So then we'll take care of it on Wednesday. Thank you. I had forgotten when you're. So we'll be doing agenda setting on Wednesday this week, but we'll discuss then the time to allot and the timeline for doing that, with Superintendent Johnson to be able, and if that's acceptable to everybody, that's how we can program in, knowing that there is some urgency to want to do it. So that's my suggestion for how we are able to discuss this more fully, to consider our roles in governance and how the board feels as a whole. And that would be what I think we obviously are going to be working on. So that's my reflection for the evening. Thank you.
Sure. So I think that we attempted to work on deliberating how do we handle an issue where we think our governance structure does not address the problem that we have found. And are struggling with how do we make good on our values despite ourselves. I'm confident that we'll be able to do that, although even if we're not entirely clear what a solution might look like or what the total ramifications are. But it at least seems to me that there's a pretty common interest in figuring this out. By words of caution, and someone who has to deal with process and ordinances and things like that is once you break it, it's broken. And so that we should do this very thoughtfully, speedily, but thoughtfully, because had some recent elections turned out differently, there may be members of this body who have different intentions. And so I think we need to make sure that our governance culture remains robust and that our procedures remain sound, that we don't create situations where there's, for lack of a better term, chaos that could happen if we have members of the board who choose to just bring things to the body for action that are not consistent with maybe what they think is consistent with their interpretations of our operational culture. So I'm interested to see how this goes. I'm confident we'll arrive at a pretty good solution. I just don't know what that looks like yet.
The best part of today was public comment. And I appreciated very much hearing from so many members of this community about the value they place on the opportunities to engage with world languages, namely Japanese and Hmong. And I look forward to agenda setting this week on Wednesday at 11 a.m. when we will put an item on our next agenda or some very soon agenda, because it's important that we expeditiously address this. I take your point, Commissioner Clements, that we need to do so thoughtfully and with an eye toward the future. At the same time, if members of this body are elected that are determined to destroy our governance culture and equity commitment, they will do so. And fortunately, so far, our community has shown up tonight, and they've showed up at the ballot box in support of our equity commitment and in support of people and candidates who also campaigned on exactly that. And so I feel a great deal of responsibility as the people who are in these seats today to act on the values that we ran on. The end. Thank you.
You know, I see coherent governance as a board tool. And it's a tool that we use to focus our attention on the things that are important. But I think that tool is now getting in the way of us being able to discuss what's important. And when it's hindering what our discussion, I think, should be, then I think it's problematic. And I have struggled with coherent governance, but I haven't struggled to the extent that I'm struggling with it right now. Because for me, languages is core. It's a key that students need to have access to. And for I as a board member to really be learning in what's happening in some of the core educational priorities by receiving emails through that's not how things I think are supposed to be. So I hope that we do actually fine tune what we have as a tool for coherent governance. But this thing we call coherent governance in the books we have, they aren't perfect. And every board that's taken these coherent governance policies has tweaked them and tooled them to what the board finds as valuable. So, you know, I don't think tweaking it here and there is actually going to blow anything up. I think it's going to make it stronger.
Well,
You know, I was only a vote against the coherent model, primarily because it wasn't how it's laid out doesn't allow you avenues for being reactive. and giving its newness, we are not as knowledgeable to be proactive in creating policies the way we need. We as a school board, we took a lot of steps backwards. Commissioner Farrar mentioned that some of us hold ourselves to a standards of embracing EDI. Never mind the 72 emails, the 7 text messages. As only a person of color on this particular school board, to have neighbors knock on your door from the Hmong community. In tears. I've failed in this particular position. I assume in the next 2 years, if I decide to stay, I will continue to fail. But what I cannot do as a representative of marginalized groups in this particular community, this is unacceptable. And to Commissioner Clement's concern about tweaking things to a point where it's chaos, I would argue that was positive chaos for an hour, the comments that actually was there. I would also argue that given what actually happened with world languages could actually happen with the selection of a math book if people are bothered by actually the examples that are used that actually expand to actually looking at groups across various cultures. Or the elimination of actually African-American history where we actually say the civil rights movement and or the Civil War was just about states' rights. That can happen in this model by the same particular district. Yeah, you know what though? I'm trying to, my new leaf is actually trying to find some positives. We have opportunities to actually get better. This particular issue, we have to get better. And its current setup is unacceptable. Thank you.
The I don't know. I echo a lot of what Dr. Farrar said, and I think to your concerns, Commissioner Clements, regarding we have been elected to these positions. We are the people sitting in the room, and I'm not going to live in fear of who could get in the future. This is, you know, it's, I think if the community elects certain people and they're the people in this room and they're the people making decisions, then that's who the community has charged their schools to. That's democracy. That's how it works. But they've charged their schools to us and to our policies. And they didn't show up here tonight in criticism of our policy or our school district. Quite the contrary. They showed up here in sincere gratitude and awe and appreciation for the thing that we are charged to protect. And we say, close the achievement gaps. And at the same time, we take away the only 2 languages of that even represent a culture of color. The 2 things are happening at the same time. It's appalling to me that we live in that we're sitting here in that type of hypocrisy because of a stupid binder of words. That is ridiculous to me. And I struggle to see what my purpose here is if I cannot take something and say, hey, this violates this thing, this book of words, and there's actually no mechanism for me to stand up to that. I can't call for a vote. I can't do anything. I'm just paralyzed. And that feels wrong. And I'm excited for the opportunity to talk about it.
But I also don't want us to be bogged down in procedure and perfectionism and trying to figure out just the perfect way to thread the needle, because in a couple of months, those courses will disappear from a catalog and they will be gone. So I don't know. I look forward to it being on an agenda as quickly as possible. That's the end of my statement.
So I think for me, what strikes me as the most important thing is that we keep in mind, I think we are actually all speaking from the same place. We're not against each other here. And I think that the strengths, this feels like the biggest challenge I've ever experienced. But I think it's our relationships and it's the structure that we're going to come out stronger. We have to find the right path. And that's what we're on.
This time I hear a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and the Eau Claire Area School Board.